So in Korean it's kind of harder because Korean has, I think, more sounds to work with than Japanese does. So the introduction in Korean is harder to say than the Japanese introduction. But so 하지메마시테 in Korean is 처음 뵙겠습니다. 처음 뵙겠습니다. So that's 처음, 처음. So it's like cake. 처음, 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 처음. It's not just 처음. So 처음, 처음. And 처음 literally means like first time. Next part, 처음 뵙겠습니다. 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 Actually, it's more like a 뵙겠습니다, but you don't hear people say 처음 뵙겠습니다. That's not, you don't pronounce like that. But it does have a little bit of a 뵙, but it's very subtle. It's like, it's not strictly 뵙겠습니다, but it's 뵙. Do you kind of hear the difference? It's not a big deal if you don't do the slight 뵙, because people will still know what you're saying. So you can say 뵙겠습니다 if it's hard for you to say 뵙. I don't know how to explain it. I'm sorry, this is probably horrible. But 처음 뵙겠습니다. 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 하지메마시테 처음 뵙겠습니다. Is pretty similar tonalities. So there's different I for informal and formal. For formal, it's 저, J-U-H, 저. For informal, it's 나, 저 and 나. You wouldn't say 저 to like your friends. In Korean, you would say 저. Remember the whole X is Y thing? And that particle in between, that pretty much is to be, so like is, am, are. That particle in the middle in Japanese is wa, remember? In Korean, it's nun, like nun. Or it could be nun, or un. This all depends on what comes before it. So it is more complicated. For example, if you were to say I am, that's 저, right? Formally it's 저. 저, you say 는. Because if you try to say 저은, that's harder than saying 저는, or 전. You know, it doesn't really work. You can't really like distinguish that you're saying two different things. That's why instead of saying you say 는. I hope this makes sense. If it doesn't, you can always ask me questions. But 저는, which is I am informal, or 나는. You would say 나은. That's kind of hard to say, you know. But 저는, 나는, that means I am. So 저는, and then your name. In Japanese, you usually just say your last name, but you can say both your last name and your first name. And Japanese and Korean, I think Chinese too, you say your last name first and then your first name. So my name is Kim Hee-soo in Korean, which is Hee-soo Kim in American accent, I guess. But Kim Hee-soo is my name. So I would say 저는 Kim Hee-soo, and then we need an ending, des in Japanese, right? But in Korean it's 입니다. It's actually 입니다, but 입니다 is kind of hard, so we slur it. 입니다, so it's an M sound. 저는 김희수입니다. Or if you want to say, if you're introducing yourself to like a younger kid, that you don't need to be formal to like a younger kid, you can say 나는 희수, just your first name. 나는 희수야. Ya is like the ending there. Ya is very, very informal. 나는 희수야. there's other ways you can introduce yourself, but I don't want to go too complicated. So 저는 김희수입니다. Or 나는 희수야. In Japanese, 私は Kimura desu. If you know some Japanese, you know when people, they have the honorific ending like san. Kimura-san, or Takeshi-san, or whatever, san. That's like a honorific. It kind of means like Mr. or Miss. But when you address yourself, you would never say 私は Kimura-san desu. 私は Kimura-san desu. That's not right. You always say 私は Kimura desu. But when you like address someone else, for example, it says どうも. If Domo was talking to me, he would say Kimura-san, Kimura-san, if we had a formal relationship. Kimura-san, Kimura-san. If we're informal and we're friends, and we know that we're okay with calling each other by our first name, he would just say Nozomi, 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 Nozomi. Nozomi means hope in Japanese, so Nozomi is my Japanese name. Nozomi, Nozomi. He doesn't have to say Kimura-san or Kimura. He can call me Kimura. He can call me whatever he wants. Boy, this sounds kind of... But he can call me by my first name or my last name, whatever. Domo can do whatever he wants. So in Korean, after you say 저는 김희수입니다 or 저는 whatever your name is, 입니다, you can end with 잘 부탁드립니다. 잘 부탁드립니다. 잘, which means good or well. 부탁 literally means a favor. 잘 부탁드립니다. 드립니다 literally means like I'm giving it to you, which doesn't really make sense. Well or good, favor, I'm giving you. I'm giving you a good favor. That's not what it means. It just means like, man, how do I explain this? 잘 부탁드립니다 is kind of like, I guess it just means like nice to meet you.